As Alison says, my name's Anna Golawski. I do lots of work with various organisations on mental health in general, but also helping people understand pressure and stress, the difference between the two and how they can mitigate stress. And also in this session, we're going to have a look at some of the ways that we can build our resilience. So quite a lot to go through. I am more than happy to share a copy of the slides afterwards. So if people want to drop either myself or Alison an email, happy to share the slides and details of other open webinars that I've got coming up on similar topics. So what we're going to go through the next 45 minutes or so is understanding sort of pressure and stress in the context of mental health, and then looking at the difference between the two. So why is it that sometimes we can be under pressure and a little bit of stress, but it's quite healthy and it's motivating, versus the stress where we feel just so overwhelmed and just can't see the wood for the trees. We'll have a look at some of the common stress factors that we can be aware of, how we can spot signs of stress in ourselves and how it manifests in ourselves, and then a couple of top tips in terms of building resilience to cope with the challenges, the sort of the day-to-day stuff, let alone the pandemic and the roadmap that we're expecting next week. So why should we care about this stuff? I always think there's probably sort of three aspects to thinking about this. I mean, first of all, there's the business case. So if we can be more mindful of our mental health and well-being and manage our stress levels better, it's going to help us make better decisions, be more productive, be more proactive in the workplace. If we have employees, then obviously there's the legal case that we need to be aware of. That's there to protect employees from excessive stress in the workplace, quite notably the Health and Safety Act and the Equality Act. But for me, I think it's always about the people, so whether it's our teams, whether it's our colleagues, whether it's ourselves, just looking after ourselves, is absolutely fundamental. And by all means, we want to come to work, to do our best, to go the extra mile, but not pushing ourselves or others to the point of burnout where people have to take a day off sick. And there's also this statistic, which is from the University of Warwick, which I find incredibly amusing. How they got it so precise, I don't know, but apparently we are 12% more productive when we're in a positive mood. And the way that this shows up is that we get things done. So the boring things, the admin, the form filling, the filing, we just get it done. We sort of take it in our stride. It doesn't seem such an onerous task. Same with the household chores, putting the bins out, the laundry, the dishwasher. We get it done, we don't really think about it too much. Whereas when we're feeling quite negative and overwhelmed by everything, every single little task and chore can feel incredibly overwhelming. So let's have a think about sort of mental health in general in the context of pressure and stress. And I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that this is something which is being spoken about a lot more these days. It's really sort of risen on the agenda, I think, for a lot of organisations to try and understand it, to be able to support people. But when it comes to sort of mental health, we still tend to think about it quite negatively. We tend to talk about mental health, but what people are talking about is a mental illness. Whereas mental health is part of our overall health. It's how we cope with the daily ups and downs of everyday life, running our own businesses, let alone during the pandemic and all the cancellations and the changes that we've had to deal with. It's how we feel about ourselves and our future, how we deal with the bigger events, the negative events and the stresses in our life, whether it's work or home life. It influences our self-esteem and our confidence, and also influences in some part our thought patterns, our feelings, our emotions, and our behaviours in general. So it's really important that we pay attention to this if we want to be successful in businesses going forwards. And in the same way that we're all on a spectrum when it comes to our physical health, some people incredibly fit, healthy, lots of exercise, sort of great diets and everything, other people not so much. So we are on a spectrum when it comes to our mental health. So what we're ideally aiming to be at is at the upper end of the mental health spectrum. So trying to sort of be aware of our mental health, try and keep healthy, but also noticing when we're not coping quite so well before we get to the point where we're really struggling, and ideally before we get to the point where we're totally unwell and we have to be off work. And one of my favourite phrases around this is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if we can notice the signs, the triggers of stress within ourselves and do something about it sooner rather than later, it's much better than trying to rebounce and come back afterwards, after we've been unwell. A little bit like our dental health, we don't wait until we've got toothache to start brushing our teeth. We brush our teeth on a regular basis to look after them. And I really want to sort of advocate that we do that for our mental health as well, to cope not only with the pandemic, but day-to-day sort of pressures and demands on us. So first question for you then, we're particularly looking at stress in this session, but what does stress mean to you? So when you hear it as a phrase, as a term, what does it mean to you in terms of words, connotations, definitions? And if you can answer in the chat box for me, that'd be great. And then everyone can sort of see it. Or if you want to take yourselves off mute, you're more than welcome to as well, whatever works best for you. But what does stress mean to you? How would you describe it, or what pops into your head when you hear that word? I can hear some typing going on there.
Can't get that to work very well. I'd say overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, yes, yeah, really. That's a great way to start it. Yeah, overwhelmed. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the next couple of months for all of us, when things start to get back to normal, we're gonna, I hope, I feel that we're going to get overwhelmed with a lot of things that we've got to do, catch up from what we haven't been able to do through lockdown, and that worries me slightly, because obviously you've got to try and manage brides' expectations. If we can only open, let's say, the end of May, and we've got a bride that's getting married in June and she wants her dress finished, with the best will in the world, we've only got 4 weeks to get a bespoke dress finished or alterations finished. And if she lives in London and we're based in Stratford upon Avon, how is she going to get up here unless she can come every weekend or in the week? So yeah, that's stressing me, because I don't know how I'm going to be able to get that message over to the brides. There are only so many days in a week and so many hours in a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great point that you make there. It is that kind of anticipation and that overwhelm. It's not the one dress that you need to make and to sort of get it fitted perfectly. It's everything else. It's all the other brides and all the other dresses that you've got. So I think that overwhelm really sort of describes it nicely.
Can I add in there as well? Very similar, Lynette, but I'm a celebrant, and normally when couples, lots of my couples, we've already written a script, so we're just waiting for the third or fourth rescheduled date before we make some tweaks to it. But some of them are new bookings. But normally couples engage all the way through, and I've started writing their script a good 6 months before their wedding. But lots of them aren't wanting to engage because they're not sure if their wedding's going to happen. So I can see that the script is being pushed further and further back, and I can see a lot of very quick turnarounds. It won't have any less time spent on it, but it'll be a lot of time crammed in and a lot of very long days.
Yes, and nights.
And nights, exactly.
On weekends,
Got to keep the magic going.
What's a weekend?
No, there's no such thing as a weekend, is there?
That's it's interesting to hear that sort of there's a couple of different sort of parts of the wedding business, but sort of anticipating the same kind of like the overwhelm and managing the expectations of other people as well, their demands that they put on us. If we Google the word stress, it comes up with over 1.7 billion results. When I first started doing this type of workshop a few years ago, and I sort of Googled sort of stress definitions and stuff like that, it was at 600 million. So it's absolutely sort of trebled in the last couple of years. And I certainly know over the past pandemic, sort of stress levels have definitely risen. The definition that I like when it comes to describe stress, which kind of picks up really nicely on what you were saying, is where the situation, where the demands of a person exceeds that person's resources or ability to cope. And what I like about this definition is that it's not suggesting that there's anything sort of wrong with the person. It's all of the demands that are being placed on that person externally that exceeds their resources or their ability to cope. It's just like having too many plates that they're trying to balance in one go. And stress itself comes from an engineering term, so it's not really a medical term, but we've kind of adapted it to apply to humans. And it's the actual sort of breaking point of a piece of material or metal, you know, when it just can't bend back. And that's why it's then sort of adapted for, you know, for us as humans. I think often the word stress is used in the wrong way, because quite often I hear people say, oh, I'm really stressed. And you think, you know, you're not really stressed. It's just that someone's asked you to do something and it's a Friday afternoon and you wanted to leave work early and they've asked you to do a project. You know, that's more to do with being irritated than stressed. And I think the problem is where it's not used properly is that when people really are genuinely stressed, it stops them being able to talk up and to ask for help and to acknowledge it. Stress itself is something that we've had sort of from evolutionary times. You know, when we used to live out in sort of, you know, tribes in the wilds, it was that fight, flight or freeze response. So it was there to keep us safe from wild animals, tigers that were about to attack us. And what happens is when we're feeling really stressed is that our heart beats faster, is trying to pump extra blood and oxygen around our bodies. That's why sometimes people can feel a bit lightheaded. Our adrenaline and our cortisol levels rise, so we're ready, we're alert, we're ready to take action and fight off the tiger or run away if need be. Our sleep gets disrupted, so when we're feeling stressed, you know, if our bodies think we're about to be attacked by a tiger, the last thing it wants us to do is have a little nap. So that's why quite often when we're feeling stressed, we just can't switch off and relax, we can't get to sleep easily, or we wake up in the middle of the night worrying about things, you know, whether it's clients, brides, projects that we need to do. And our eating patterns can get affected as well. Again, if our bodies think we're about to be attacked by a tiger and have to run away, it doesn't want us to sit down and have a big 3-course dinner and then try and run away. So stress in itself is there to protect us and to keep us safe. And there's lots and lots of different sources of stress and pressure. So our job itself could be stressful, you know, our teams, the relationships could be a source of stress, the organizational culture could be a source of stress for some people, families and communities, you know, can be stressful. You know, we put our own pressures on ourselves, and you know, there's the world and the society, and sort of, you know, typically sort of waiting for government announcements, the roadmap, what's going to happen to hospitality, to retail, to organisations coming up over the next few months is also going to be a source of stress for some people. So work itself isn't always a source of stress, but I think quite often it manifests itself in the workplace because that's where we spend most of our working days. But what makes you stressed? You know, and again, sort of, you know, thinking about trying to keep at the proactive or the upper end of the mental health spectrum, you know, one of the ways that we can do that is noticing what makes us stressed. But can you give me a couple of, you know, examples, either sort of verbally or in the chat box, as to what makes you stressed, or what you've noticed, you know, makes colleagues, friends, family feel stressed?
Too much work and not enough time to do it.
Yeah.
Too much work, not enough time. Yeah.
And no one else you can ask to help. There is only you.
Only you. Yeah.
There's no lifeboat, if you know, to help save you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like the other lady, I'm a bespoke dressmaker too, and there is only me. So
yeah.
There's too much work to cope with.
Yeah.
I mean, I am lucky. I've got a team, but you know,
Yeah.
I still have to manage it. I'm still, you know, I still have to, you know, do all the other business stuff. You know, I've got a great team of designers and seamstresses that I work with. So, you know, I feel your pain as a bespoke dressmaker because it's going to get absolutely hectic.
Yeah, I have to do all of it on my own, everything.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Side of it, admin side, you know, there is only me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I do delegate. I'm quite a good delegator. There's certain things I don't do. And I think that's from when I've had issues with my mental health before. Nothing to do with work. It was to do with relationships. And but I felt completely overwhelmed by everybody wanting 2 penneth worth of my backside. And I know it's big, but it's not that big. And so I did learn at that point to delegate things that I'm either not good at, or my time's better served being in front of house as opposed to, you know, working in the business and not on the business. I think that's a classic phrase that we've probably all heard of.
I love that phrase, tuppence worth of my backside. I'm going to use that. That's brilliant. I love it.
Well, they did. There's only so much to go around, so there we are.
Yeah. Any other sort of particular triggers that make you feel stressed, or work related or outside of work, that you can sort of think of? So we've got things like sort of the managing the demands, expectations, not enough time for everything.
I think there's a perception that we're all women here. There is a perception that us, strong business women have got it all, and I think we do. I certainly put myself under a bit of stress about not getting enough exercise and that sort of thing. To be fair, I live with my mum. I care for my mum, so there's certain things that I just feel like, and we lost my dad back in September, so I don't think she's quite ready for me to sort of go off for the day. Work's different, but she needs a bit of support at the moment, like we all do. So there is a bit of pressure there, and it's, as I said, it comes back to that, not enough of me to go around, and it's I don't have a husband to rely on. I've got a partner, but he lives in France, which to me is the perfect relationship, by the way, girls. I see him when I can, but there's that sort of, I'm being pulled in lots of different ways. My children are all grown up, thank goodness, but I don't know how women cope at the moment with running a business, being a wife, looking after the kids, homeschooling, all that sort of stuff. My heart goes out to them. I just don't know. So
and we're hearing that people are working longer hours, particularly when they're homeschooling as well, because they're trying to do work first thing in the morning from sort of 5 or 6 o'clock, homeschooling during the day, and then working again late in the evening. Going
so I think it's being pulled in lots of directions, and not enough time for me.
Yeah, really good point. We are all human, so we're all unique. So what makes one person stressed might be exciting to somebody else. It might even be water off a duck's back to somebody else. But stress tends to fall into one of these three factors. So caring for things and protecting things that we care about. So you were saying about looking after your mum. Obviously that could be a stress factor because it's a responsibility. You want to look after her. That's that goes for all of our sort of family, friends, loved ones, being able to pay the bills, the mortgage, the rent, all of these kind of things can be a source of stress for us. The more we care about it, the more pride we have in things, the more, likely it could be that it's a source of stress. Social evaluation, so that kind of failure, being seen negatively by other people can be a stress factor, so responding to demands where people want their dresses made to a certain way in time, it's sort of, you don't want to be negative, you don't want to let people down. It can be a huge source of stress for some people, and this is why sort of public speaking can also be stressful for people because they're putting their head above the parapet. And then the third one is that lack of control. So it's quite a few of us have sort of mentioned that just too many things that are beyond our capabilities, beyond our control. So it's not each individual situation, it's not each individual words or dresses, it's everything, that cumulative thing that is out of our control because we're waiting for the decision from from government to give us the roadmap to give us that sense as to what's going to happen going forward. So when you're sort of noticing that you're sort of begin to feel stressed, it might be because it's triggering one of these factors. Trying to keep up the positive energy, someone saying in the chat box as well, is really difficult. As humans, we have this automatic negative bias anyway. Not feeling control of the situation is so hard. And it really is a difficult thing because any kind of like lack of control can be stressful. Just being on public transport when the train sort of stops for no apparent reason, you're just not informed as to what's happening, can be incredibly frustrating and stressful. And as humans, we like to have that element of control and predictability and certainty. So absolutely, sort of the digging deep, keeping up that positive energy is challenging. And what happens when it comes to stress is that we have our own stress bucket. So all of these stresses flow into our bucket on a regular basis. So these can be the little things, the day-to-day admin, sort of, you know, the business, you know, looking after family, friends, chores, etc. And then what happens is that we have good coping strategies that can help let the, you know, the stress out in terms of the tap there at the bottom of the bucket. We have the bad coping strategies, which tend to be those quick fixes. Typical culprits tend to be the sort of the caffeine, the alcohol, the cigarettes, the chocolate cake and the biscuits, you know, the little things that feel good in the moment but aren't really healthy and sustainable. But then what happens is when our stress gets too much for us, the bucket overflows, and this is when we develop the, you know, the snapping, you know, we just don't have the patience or the tolerance. And quick question is, how might you know that your stress bucket is getting too full? You know, what might some of the signs be that you've noticed in yourself or noticed in other people that, you know, perhaps their stress bucket is getting, oh, excuse me, I've got hiccups, getting too full and overflowing. Because again, thinking about being proactive about this, the sooner we can notice those things, we can actually do something about it rather than sort of deteriorating. So what might some of the signs be that someone's stress bucket is on the verge of overflowing?
I get snappy and irritable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, snappy and irritable. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people probably sort of nodding in agreement with that one. Yeah, very snappy, very irritable. We just don't have the patience and the tolerance, and it's the little things that normally we won't be bothered about suddenly seem incredibly annoying and irritable. Yeah.
My poor husband stays away when I get like that.
And it does tend to be the closest ones to us, doesn't it? That sort of bear the brunt of it, bless them. Yeah.
Mine isn't around.
Lack of sleep is also another one. You know, sort of it can be sort of, you know, very difficult to sort of, you know, fall off to sleep. So, you know, our brains are just so full and so busy trying to sort of, you know, think of everything and keep on top of things. You know, it can be hard to switch off and go to sleep. Then that in itself, you know, becomes a bit of a vicious circle because we need sleep to be able to wake up fresher the next day. Yeah. What else? What else are some of those little signs that we might pick up in ourselves or others?
All of the above, I think.
All of the above. Yeah.
I think it's difficult to really sort of. It's sometimes it's a slow, gradual thing, and you don't actually realise it. You are stressed until, you know, sometimes it's too late. Like you say, all of a sudden you get a bride come in that is demanding something, and you're thinking, you know, it's not my problem that you don't fit in your dress because you've been in lockdown and you've put on 2 stone, you know.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Happened a lot. I'm dreading it. I really am. So, yeah. And you try and be sympathetic, but there becomes a point where you've you know, time after time after time, you've you know, you've had the same thing happen, and you think, just stop putting stuff in your mouth, you know. I don't say it, but I think my face says it. I'm not very good at hiding.
I think naughty thoughts, but never try and say them.
Yeah. 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 Sometimes I'm really pleased that we, you know, our thoughts don't come out as little speech bubbles at times. Food is also an indicator. Mentioning there in the chat, you know, either sort of, you know, eating too much or just kind of, you know, you're so busy that you skip meals and don't notice. Yeah, absolutely. So there's all sorts of things that can sort of, you know, be what we called our stress signature. And again, we're all unique in terms of our signs of stress. So for some people, it can be the aches, the pains, are sort of like the headaches, those kind of like tension headaches that you can get. For some people, it can be worrying more than they would do normally, feeling particularly negative, finding it difficult to concentrate or make decisions. Some people can feel incredibly sort of snappy and irritable or tearful. And for some people, it can be the eating, the sleeping patterns, drinking and smoking. And it's really about noticing the change, you know. So again, you know, the sooner we can sort of start trying to notice some of these and have that self-awareness, we can try and take steps to mitigate it. I want to talk about pressure and stress as well, because quite often we talk about sort of pressure and stress interchangeably, but this pressure and stress curve diagram that you can see in the page there, this comes from sports psychology, and this is really trying to sort of, you know, get us to think about the difference between when are we under that healthy amount of pressure, where we feel motivated, engaged. So yes, we've got a lot of work on, but we can feel confident that we can achieve it in terms of the deadlines. We've got that clear direction. We've got sort of people that, you know, perhaps we can delegate to, and we can plan ahead, and we can get into that optimum performance bit. But then it's trying to be able to notice within ourselves, when are we tipping over into the stressful side of things, you know? So when have we gone beyond the healthy pressure? Because we do need a little bit of pressure, because without pressure we can become very bored. The task fills the time available. But too much pressure tips over into stress, and that's when we sort of notice our stress signature coming out. You know, it's the irritability, the anxiousness, the tiredness, you know, the self-doubt, and sort of, you know, questioning our things, and feeling sort of, you know, very worried about little things and irritable. Again, when it comes to sports people, ideally we want them to be in the optimum performance, you know, so they're under the right amount of pressure, they're training well, but we don't want them to the point where they're performing too much and they're getting burnt out and exhausted and prone to injury. So how can we handle pressure and stress then? Well, this kind of diagram on the page there just kind of like slightly explains how we sort of respond to the various demands that are placed on us. So someone asks us of something, you know, whether it's a day-to-day task or whether it's a new bridal requirement or something, and we make this unconscious decision, you know, basically, can I handle this? You know, have I got enough capacity in terms of workload to handle this? And if we think, yes, we can, then we see it as a challenge and we're up for it and we respond to it more positively. But if we think that we can't, either because of, you know, what they're demanding is too much, or they've put on way too much weight for us to actually be able to sort of, you know, adjust their dress in time, or whether it's just, you know, the time scale just isn't feasible, we respond to it in a stressful way. And that determines how we respond. So if we feel that actually, no, I haven't got the resources, the capability, the time to deal with this, we respond to it from a stressful way where we just can't see the wood for the trees. So we get into that fight, flight, freeze mentality. We can become very emotional. So we're in that kind of like reactive mode. We can be sort of in a very emotional in terms of irritability or, you know, impatient. And we can feel very panicky. You know, we're trying to make really fast, quick decisions without really pausing to think things through and to be able to sort of, you know, plan things ahead quite so well. Whereas if we see things as a challenge, you know, it's like, yeah, okay, it might demand a bit of extra effort, you know, a few longer hours, the occasional weekend, but actually ultimately we can achieve this for the bride, for the client. We can see things and respond to things with much more clarity. It's easier for us to ask for support. It's easier to plan, to prioritize, and where possible to delegate things. We're coming and we're responding to people with a much more considered response. So rather than that knee-jerk emotional reaction that then you might regret afterwards in terms of the decision, it's much easier to sort of respond in a considered way. And it's much easier to tap into our knowledge and our experience as well, because quite often when we're in that sort of stress panic mode, it's not until afterwards that you think, oh yeah, I could have asked so-and-so, they could have helped me, or I've done that before, you know, I could have redone that again or something, you know. But when you're in, you know, the heat of the moment, it's really, really difficult to sort of, you know, think rationally and clearly, and to be able to do some of these kind of things. And I like to think of it a bit of a sort of a stress SatNav, you know, so if we can sort of, you know, plan and anticipate these things a little bit better, rather than being sort of, you know, caught out, we can try and sort of plan ahead. And I know absolutely it's not always easy, because we're waiting for the roadmap to be announced next week, and then sort of, you know, what is that going to mean to us? But, you know, as much as possible, sort of, you know, trying to sort of, you know, plan ahead to mitigate these things rather than sort of, you know, being caught out. But what do you do to manage your stress bucket? You know, so when you notice that your stress bucket is getting a bit too full, it's about to overflow, what do you do that can help you relax, unwind, recharge, switch off? You know, what helps you? Going for a walk, yeah, that's a great one actually, you know. And even getting outside, I don't know whereabouts you are. I'm sort of down here in Brighton, you know, it's a bit overcast and rainy, but, you know, even on a day like today, just getting out, you know, breath of fresh air can be really helpful. It doesn't have to be sort of bright sunshine, but going
I like
out
gardening.
Yes, yeah, gardening's a great one as well. Yeah, you know, very relaxing, therapeutic, and before you know it, it's sort of, you know, a few hours have passed by. Some people saying about sort of, you know, exercise, so going for a run. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, switching off from the social media, so leaving your phone deliberately in another room so that we're not distracted. And I think it's that kind of that doom scrolling is a new kind of like phrase I've heard during lockdown. It's kind of noticing the difference between where are we looking at social media, where is it helpful and beneficial, and where is it tipping over to the point where actually, you know, this isn't helpful, this is just adding
Well,
to
it
my
does add, because you see other people, what they're doing, you think, oh my God, you know, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. So sometimes, yeah, your
yeah.
phone is your worst enemy.
Absolutely, yeah. And we get into that compare and despair mode, don't we? You know, sort of, you know, 10 minutes later, it's just like, oh, yeah, yeah. And again, it's, you know, it's just being aware that this is happening, you know, before we sort of get sucked into it too much. Yeah, absolutely. Couple of things to do in terms of sort of, you know, coping with the stress symptoms. So exercise, you know, is absolutely fantastic for people. Again, within people's mobility or fitness levels is appropriate because it can help promote serotonin and reduces the stress symptoms. Breathers and restorers, so going for a walk, doing the gardening, you know, switching off from sort of, you know, social media and stuff like that. Anything that can help relax you, calm you down, and sort of, you know, settle you. You know, that might be a nice, lovely hot bath with some candles. It could be watching sort of, you know, TV, reading a book, anything like that that works for you. And obviously a healthy diet. You know, we know this. You know, I'm not telling you anything new here, but it's really good for our physical and mental health. But we do need to deal with the source of the stress. So all of these things are fantastic in terms of dealing with the symptoms, but, you know, at some point we need to deal with the source of the stress and try to identify that as best as we can. So let's move on to think about how we can sort of build up some of our resilience levels to deal with stress. And by resilience, what we mean is the ability to recover from setbacks, you know, to adapt well to change and keep going in the face of adversity. And resilience isn't just about toughening up. So it isn't just about that kind of, you know, head down, keep going, sort of, you know, not being empathetic or supportive to other people. You know, it's being able to change. It's sort of coming up with a plan B. You know, sometimes it is just kind of sort of, you know, keeping going and sort of, you know, keeping our heads down in the face of adversity. And one of the things that I like when it comes to resilience, which was taken from boxing, I think it was Mike Tyson, but don't quote me on that just in case, is that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, you know. And I think, you know, as women in business and, you know, other business people who might be listening to this afterwards, you know, we all have the best business plans, you know, and they look absolutely fantastic until something like this pandemic comes and knocks us totally off course. So what can we do when we face the setbacks? Well, you know, the typical kind of like behaviours when we have a big setback like this is that we can blame ourselves, or we might do, you know, blame other people for things. Sometimes if we're feeling particularly negative, we can sort of, you know, catastrophize. Sometimes we can just feel so overwhelmed that we can become, you know, very helpless. We just can't see a way forward. You know, we just can't see the wood for the trees. We might go into that fight or flight response. We might just want to run away from the situation, just go and hide under the duvet until everything sort of, you know, passes over us. Or we might be in denial. You know, we might be sort of, you know, nope, don't want to admit to this, you know, sort of, you know, I don't want to face this setback. I'm going to be in denial. So one of the key things about sort of dealing with resilience is recognizing your typical response, you know, when you have a big setback. In terms of resilient characteristics, which are sort of, you know, helpful for people to sort of, you know, think about, resilient people tend to be very good at committing to goals. You know, so they have that tenacity. They don't give up at the first hurdle. You know, they keep going, even if it is a plan B that they have to work around. You know, this is their commitment. They've got a very clear purpose. They're very good at being able to focus on what they can control. So a lot of things are out of our control at the moment, like the bigger decisions, you know, in society, pandemic, lockdown restrictions are out of our control, but it's trying to focus and divert our mental energies, which are sort of finite, to what we can control. Not blaming ourselves too much for things, you know, so taking responsibility for actions, but not being a scapegoat for things. People are empathetic, so resilient people are very empathetic. They're very good at asking other people for support, but also giving that support to others as well. They're very good at thinking positively, and one of the best ways of trying to do this is trying to think of 3 things on a regular basis that have gone well, you know, so it doesn't have to be the big things, but even like the little things on a regular basis can really help us change that mindset and think positively. And excuse me, seeing things as challenges. Again, sometimes it can be really difficult where everything feels like it's an overwhelming challenge, but you know, it's developing our skills, it's seeing things as challenges and opportunities to grow rather than being kind of like fixed where we are. And it's a little bit like a sailor, you know, they can learn all the skills of being a sailor and managing a boat, you know, but at some point they have to leave the safety of the harbour and go out onto the rough seas to really test their mettle. When we talk about resilience, we often talk about mindset. So we have sort of either closed or pessimistic mindset versus an open mindset. The typical things that we tend to see when someone has a closed mindset is that they're very sort of, you know, fixed. Things have to be absolutely perfect or they're a failure. It's that very kind of, you know, sort of, you know, fixed thinking, you know, it's good, bad, you know, there's nothing in between. They're not very open to sort of feedback, suggestions and flexibility, whereas people with an optimistic mindset tend to be more willing to go with the flow a little bit more. You know, they're happy to go with plan B. Things don't have to be absolutely perfect, and they're very good at taking on feedback and sort of, you know, constructive advice from other people as well, and open to other suggestions. Also, when it comes to a resilient mindset, so thinking about the 3 Ps of resilience, and this was from Martin Seligman, who talks a lot around learned optimism. So it's not taking things personally, you know, so recognizing, you know, that, you know, this whole pandemic, the whole situation, and, you know, it's not us, it's not a personal thing, you know, everyone is, you know, in this, you know, together. And I know we're in sort of, you know, we're in, you know, different boats, you know, but we're all in the same kind of storm. It's not permanent, you know, things won't last forever, you know, there is a way out, you know, this will end eventually, you know, and I know it can feel like it's going to, you know, be a long time yet, but, you know, it's absolutely not permanent, and it's not pervasive, you know, so, you know, there's, you know, sometimes, you know, when things don't go quite so well in one aspect of our life, it can be very easier for us to think about everything is, you know, is rubbish and not going very well, but recognizing that just because there's one sort of, you know, particular, you know, piece of work or project or something that hasn't gone well doesn't mean that everything else has to be totally written off as well. So thinking about this sort of like the 3 Ps when we're dealing with our resilience levels. Thinking about what we can control and influence, recognizing that there are some things which are absolutely out of our control, and not trying to waste too much mental energy and effort on those things, but really trying to identify what are some of the aspects of our work and our life in this situation that we can control, where are some of those aspects that we can influence things even if we don't have direct control over them. So trying to plot things out a little bit. And then also sort of, you know, planning strategically. And by resilience and that optimistic mindset, it isn't just about sort of, you know, blindly being optimistic, keeping your fingers crossed and hoping for the best next week when we get the roadmap, nor is it being sort of, you know, totally pessimistic and sort of, you know, thinking the worst, but trying to sort of, you know, plan a little bit strategically where possible. So recognizing our emotions, you know, they drive our decisions, you know, they're there for a reason. Maybe thinking of, you know, the worst, you know, so if things get bad, you know, when it comes to the roadmap next week, thinking about our stress SatNav, you know, what's our plan B, but also planning for the best, you know, so if things get better, we might need extra resource, extra help in order to deal with the demand and the short turnaround times, you know, so what might be some of the things that we can plan for up front if things get better. Create decision milestones, you know, so again, it helps us with that flexibility going forward, you know, so we're not caught on the hop, we're not trying to, you know, think of answers and solutions in the heat of the moment, but we're, you know, we have some rough idea going forward, you know, thinking about what we might do. Trying to prioritize where possible, you know, again, I know this isn't always easy, but sort of, you know, sometimes looking at our work coming in and our sort of, you know, our bridal dates as well, I guess, you know, trying to prioritize some of those, but really keeping communication open with people as much as possible. You know, this is kind of like the key going forward, you know, so we don't get those kind of like miscommunications and assumptions that can add to people's stress levels, you know, because when we don't get that communication, it can stop us feeling in control, which can be a source of stress for people. Make sure that you're using your support networks. You know, we really need our support networks as human beings. You know, we're very tribal. We need that, you know, so keeping that social support from friends and family, keeping in touch with your clients, your brides, your husbands to be, and customers as well. Using your colleagues, your networks as well, you know, sort of, you know, whether that's work related or whether it's just kind of sort of, you know, virtual coffees, brainstorming, you know, keeping, you know, the ideas going. Maybe look for ways of collaborating with people that you probably wouldn't have needed to before, but really using the website, the Guides for Brides has got some, you know, fantastic resources and information there. But taking responsibility for your emotional state, you know, so recognizing how you're feeling and how that might be influencing your words and your actions. Be kind and tolerant to yourselves, you know, look after your stress buckets, you know, take time out to look after yourselves, you know, so that you can be in the best possible place to run your business and face with the challenges when sort of, you know, things pick up going forwards. So recognize, you know, those triggers and within your stress bucket and what you can do sooner rather than later. But don't forget the basics as well. I think, you know, quite often we can get so busy that we, you know, we even, you know, forget meal times and stuff like that. But if you're feeling a bit sluggish or a bit overwhelmed with things, you know, just think about your 5 a day for your mind, you know. So have you had enough sleep? You know, because we do need, you know, really good quality sleep for us to be able to function and perform. And in the same way that athletes, they value their rest days as much as they do their training days because they need to recharge their physical energies. We need to think about the same for our mental energies. Have you drunk enough water? You know, again, I know it's fundamentally basic, but, you know, having enough water, you know, for our brains to be able to make good decisions and think things through. Making sure that you are eating, you know, eating healthily, natural daylight, it can help with our body clocks, our circadian rhythms, and being physically active. Again, you know, it is harder when we're going from our sort of, you know, the bedroom to the dining room table, but, you know, incorporating a bit of physical activity as much as we can. Again, it's not new, it's not rocket science, but it's just about remembering to do it on a regular basis. So that takes us up to 1:45. There's time, you know, if anyone has any particular sort of, you know, questions that they want to go through now. But I would also be really curious if people want to share, you know, what's the one takeaway that you're taking from, you know, today's session that's going to help you look after your mental health levels, your stress levels. You know, is there anything that you want to add in the chat box or verbally at all that's going to, you know, help you sort of anticipate and manage stress, pressures, demands that we're expecting over the next sort of few weeks, few months? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to leave my contact details there on the page for you. So if anyone does want to sort of, you know, have a conversation and go through any of this in more detail, please feel free to reach out and get in touch with me, because I appreciate this has been sort of, you know, quite a fast kind of whistle-stop tour. Also, if you want a copy of the slides, please either contact myself or Alison. I do have quite a few other sort of free open webinars and sort of similar topics coming up, which I'm happy for you to join in again on. So any questions, any reflections from anyone in the last sort of few minutes that we've got?
No, it was really